Hey y'all, it is post-production me here, and I may have flown a bit too close to the sun. What was intended to be a 2.5 hour long recap video ended up with me recording about 11 hours of footage because fixation loves company and I am obsessed. And even when I started cutting that down, it ended up being about 4.5 hours before I really started refining it. So at that point, I decided it would be best to split the recap video up into two parts. So what you're about to watch is part 1 and part 2 will be coming out next week. I wanted to make sure that the video didn't end up being too long, but I wanted to spend enough time making sure it was really good for y'all. So thank you so much for checking this out, and I hope you enjoy the video. Hello and welcome. I am the Story Corner, and today I'm going to walk you through a plot summary / recap of the Sunbearer Trials by Aiden Thomas. First, let me just say that I absolutely adore this book with my entire heart and soul. When I saw that this was coming out and heard that it was like a combination of Percy Jackson and the Hunger Games, I was game, and I did not know how much this book would how much space it would take up in my brain, but here we are. With the sequel, Celestial Monsters, coming out on September 3rd this year, I decided that it would be a great time for a reread and a total and complete plot recap and slight analysis of the first book. I hope this is really obvious, but I'm just going to give this warning anyway. Spoiler alert for everything that happens in this book. So if you haven't read the Sunbearer Trials yet and plan on reading it, stop this video now, go do that, and then come back and then we can discuss and analyze everything that's going on here. I am all geared up. I have my Sunbearer shirt, I have my obscenely long knitting needle that I'm using as a pointer, and I also on my little board here have all of the art, the official art, pictures of a lot of the important characters, not all of them because I either didn't think about printing it up or just completely forgot, but all of this art is done by @mmarsloud on Instagram. They did the cover art for the books as well as all these really cool character cards, like their little hero stats and stuff like that. I will link to their socials in the description. Be sure to go check them out because they're doing a lot of really cool stuff, and I absolutely just love this art with my entire heart and soul. Here we are. Buckle in, get ready, because I'm about to give you a recap of the entire first book. First, there was only Sol among a sea of stars. We're given a super quick rundown of the history of the world. Sol, the being that was there before everything else, created the earth from stardust and in turn created Tierra, the dios of the earth. And together they created a race of godly children. They made the golds first, and then the jades, and then the obsidians. All of the gods were kind of out there doing their own thing, not giving much attention to their parents. And so Sol and Tierra decided to create the humans, who they loved the most because they loved them back and gave them attention. While the golds, the jades, and obsidians were all fighting over what aspects of the world they each wanted dominion over, Sol and Tierra decided to create Reino del Sol, where all of the humans and the gods could live. And eventually the golds got the really important aspects of the world like fire, water, love, weather. While the jades got the smaller, more precious responsibilities, a little more niche, like birds or bad luck. And then the obsidian gods were kind of just handed the leftovers. They were really not happy with that. The obsidians were pissed that Sol loved the humans so much, and they thought that instead of celebrating and protecting humanity like the golds and the jades, that the humans should worship them instead. The obsidians tricked the gods and stole Sol's heart, which in turn made the humans these mindless god-worshipping creatures. To save humanity, Sol stabbed themselves, and when they died, their body turned into lava and they became the sun. They were able to bind the obsidian gods into the constellations and keep them from ruling over humanity lawlessly. Tierra picked up the lava from Sol's dead body, which in turn burned his skin off and formed Sol's skull into the sunstone, and then used the rest of the body to make a bunch of smaller sunstones that would then be placed in each of the cities of Reino del Sol. And as long as the sunstones stay lit, the obsidian gods are trapped up in the constellations and can't be freed. That was a very long time ago. Now, every 10 years, in order to honor Sol's sacrifice and refuel the sunstones, that is where the Sunbearer Trials come from. It's basically a continuation of this cycle of refueling the sunstones to make sure the obsidians are locked away permanently. And now, in the present day, we open on a bit of mischief. We meet Teo, son of Quetzal, the jade diosa of birds, and Teo our sweet boy Teo here is doing a little prank in the form of property damage. There is this big old poster outside of a school that's advertising the Sunbearer Trials, and Teo is kind of salty about it because despite the history of soul sacrifice and like what that meant to protect humanity, the Sunbearer Trials have kind of become this competition where 10 semidioses between the ages of 13 and 18 compete in order to see who the Sunbearer is. Whoever ends up ranking the highest becomes a Sunbearer, and whoever ranks the lowest ends up becoming the sacrifice. Since Teo is a semidios, he is required to attend the festivities. It only happens every 10 years and is kind of a big deal. You know, the fate of the world and all that. But even then, it's kind of just a formality because it's been over 100 years since the last Jade Semidios competed in the trials, and they lost and were sacrificed. Since the gold semidioses are stronger, they get to go to the academy, which is a place where they not only train for the Sunbearer Trials, but they're also basically Reino del Sol's superheroes. They are dispatched to go deal with natural disasters and emergencies and all that kind of stuff. Meanwhile, the Jades aren't deemed powerful enough, so they just go to like regular public school. Literally the only good thing Teo sees about the trials is that he gets to travel to all the different cities and that he gets to spend some time with his best friend Nia, except she is a gold semidiosa who is the daughter of Tierra, the god of the earth, so she can manipulate metal, and she is like super strong, like one of the strongest semidiosas currently eligible for the trials. And because of that, Teo is sure that she's going to get chosen and will have to compete, so even then he doesn't get to hang out with her because she's going to be fighting for her life or fighting to not end up at the bottom and lose her life. Because Teo's mom is the goddess of birds, he and his mom are both able to actually talk to birds and like hear what they're saying. He recruits 2 of his bird companions, Perry and Pico, to help spray paint the poster with like silly faces and mustaches and cat ears because Perry and Pico are birds, so they think cats are hilarious. And they're almost done spray painting when Yolanda, one of Quetzalon's mail carriers, catches him in the act. Perry and Pico dip. They're like, see ya, and just like leave Teo out on his own. And Yolanda's like, are you being a troublemaker? And Teo's like, who, me? No. It's never mentioned if she actually sees what he did to the poster and like all the spray paint and stuff, but regardless, she tells him to just like go back home and get ready for the trials and to be on his best behavior. Each god has their own city, and because Teo's dad died when he was a baby, he was very much raised by the city and the people of the city, and so on his way home it's basically inevitable that people stop him and like ask him about the trials and who he thinks is going to get picked and what the challenges are going to be like, and Teo's just over it. He wants Nia to be safe and just like be done with it. So he dips out of those conversations very quickly and heads to a bodega where he's placed a big old candy order to pick up because Dios Maiz doesn't allow refined sugars or processed foods in Soul Temple, and so he wants to feed that sweet tooth. Teo picks up his order from Chavo, the bodega owner. Chavo is very excited for Teo and talks about how much he'd love to go to Soul Temple one day. He's never seen a gold god in person. And Chavo asks Teo if he's nervous about the trials and like if he gets selected. And Teo's like, why would I be nervous? Like, I'm just there as a formality. It doesn't even matter. Like, I'm not gonna get picked. Even though the last Jade Sant My Dios was picked 130 years ago, Chavo's still worried because everybody in Quetzalon considers Teo to be their hero. And Teo absolutely cannot accept a compliment, so he starts to leave, but not before Chavo tells him to stop by a nearby Panderia because one of the bakers, Veronica, made some green concha for his mom. So Teo starts heading through the city in that direction. He's almost at the Panzeria when people start screaming and running. Huge plumes of smoke are coming up from one of the buildings, and he realizes that it is the Panzeria, like it is on fire. He starts looking for a way to help, but there's this little girl running around going, where's Maria? Where's Maria? He asks her if Maria is like her sister, but it turns out Maria is the little girl's doll. Teo still promises that he will help her find her doll once she gets somewhere safe. So he sends the little girl off with her mom. Teo's like surveying the scene, and all down this alley is a bunch of food trucks that run on propane tanks. If the fire spreads far enough, he is basically standing in the middle of a bomb. He's trying to figure out what he can possibly do when someone screams from inside the burning building. There's this Tatira flying around like, I left her, I can't believe I left my person, because everybody in Quetzalon has like these bird companions like Pico and Perry for Teo. This bird is the companion to Veronica, the baker who has green concha for Teo's mom. Teo knows jack shit about fires and like how to help stop a fire from burning this building down, but this is his city and his people, so he feels the need to go and help. So he starts up the fire escape to go find Veronica and get her out of the building. He climbs up the fire escape to the second floor, and when he gets there, Veronica is passed out, like crumpled in the corner. He scoops her up, and just as he does, the ceiling behind him caves down, like blocking the way to the fire escape, and so he is trapped in there with a unconscious Veronica. But there is a walk-in freezer, so Teo pulls her into the freezer because he knows it'll at least buy them some time until help arrives. And help does arrive in the form of Marino, the semideus of water. His mom is Agua. Marino puts the fire out. He finds Teo and Veronica in the freezer, and when he kicks the freezer open, he is not alone. With him are Aristella and Aurelio, two semidioses of Lumbre, the goddess of flame. And Teo is not pleased with this. Like I said earlier, at the academy where all the gold go to school, not only are they training to be sunbearers, they're also responding to crises like this. Of course, they're going to send the fire twins to help like maintain and control the fire. Teo just straight up does not like Aristella. She looks at him and Veronica, like does a once over and is like, is she alive? And Teo's like, of course she is. But Aristella grabs her and gets her out of the building while Aurelio checks on Teo, and Teo very, very subtly, very low key, checks out Aurelio. And I think what's really, really funny is that the first time I read the book, in the margins, I could probably pull it out right now, but I really don't want to. I just wrote gay, question mark, question mark, question mark. So they have history. They used to be friends a really, really long time ago, but haven't talked to each other in years. Teo was a little like salty and like closed off about it. So he very much puts up like an I'm fine, I can take care of myself front. But when he gets up, he like immediately stumbles and Aurelio has to catch him and then carry him out of the building. But on the way out, Teo does stop Aurelio because he sees on the ground, slightly singed but still okay, Maria, the little girl's doll. Aurelio gets Teo out of the building and everyone swarms him like, that was so dangerous, why'd you do that? You should leave that to the heroes. And Teo is pissy about it because even though he can't like control fire or water, his mom is still a god. But there is a very sweet moment where he returns Maria to the little girl and the little girl's mom calls him their hero, which is a little like bittersweet because Teo knows he isn't a hero, like not a hero like these guys are, but it's really, really sweet. And Teo is now really, really, really late. Teo finally makes it to his mom's temple where Huemek, one of Quetzal's head priests, is waiting for him very, very impatiently. Teo knows that he's about to get the biggest lecture of his entire life. So he puts up a very much like, hey Huemek, what's going on kind of front, and Huemek's like, heard you almost got killed in a fire. Do you want to tell me about that? A deep crease settled between the older man's eyebrows. You could have gotten yourself hurt, or worse, put others' lives in danger. Teo scoffs. What was I supposed to do? Stand by and watch while Huemek cut him off? You are not a hero, Teo. Teo knows that it isn't necessarily untrue, but first, what was he supposed to do? Like, the building was burning, there are people in danger, like, is he just not supposed to go and help them? And second, no one has given him the chance to be a hero either. Part of him is super terrified he's gonna spend the rest of his life in Quetzalon being one of his mom's priests or something like that. And he's kind of worried that he will never get to like go out into the world and find what he's good at and what he likes to do and like what he wants to do with his life. Still, ouch. Ouch, Huemek. That hurts. That shit hurted. After that conversation, Teo is sent up to see his mom and change into his regalia for the opening ceremony. And Teo's mom, Quetzal, is the epitome of like a motherly spirit, and she can do no wrong in my book. I love her to my very bones. She checks in on him and asks about the fire because everybody knows about the fire now. But she does also go, oh, thank goodness that Marino, Aristella, and your friend Aurelio were there. And Teo's very much like, he is not my friend. No. And Teo gets changed into his regalia for the ceremony, which is like these nice little pants, a cape, a little circlet. Teo realized that he was trans when he was 15, and so he had top surgery and started testosterone, but the one thing that he couldn't change were his wings. They didn't really bother him as a kid, but as he got older and like started going to school, people got really, really grabby and way too much into his personal space. He hated the attention and the way it made him feel like the lone animal in a petting zoo. As if that weren't bad enough, his wings were also the source of Teo's first experiences with dysphoria. They weren't the bright blue and green of male Quetzals. firework with a grayish brown with hints of green like the female's plumage. He and a couple of the other Quetzal priests made a binder for his wings that like hold them back and underneath his shirt, and he generally just avoids looking at them even when they are out, like when he's sleeping, because they are really dull and have all these bald patches from the binder, so he just avoids them at all costs. While he's changing, his mom is like, "Are you sure you don't want to take your binder off?" Quetzal is concerned that it hurts because she is the loving mother that she is, and Teo lies and says no, because how are you supposed to tell her that even though it feels like he has another set of arms tied behind his back, he'd rather feel that than feel dysphoric from his wings? Quetzal has to go to Soul Temple early, but Teo and Huemek have to take a boat to get there. Everybody kind of starts loading up. Huemek tells Teo that the priests have everything he needs already packed for him, but Teo's like, "Don't forget my backpack." His backpack with all his contraband candy. Huemek picked up the beat-up bag from the floor, weighing it in his hands. "Homework?" he asked, side-eyeing Teo. Teo nodded vigorously. The circlet slid down to his brow. "Lots of homework," he agreed. Huemek is already over the shenanigans, but tells Teo that this is probably the most important event he will ever attend, so be on his best behavior. And Teo's like, "Me? Trouble? No." With a disgruntled grumble, Huemek turned away. "Is this because of what happened during Dia de Muertos?" "Because it was an accident. I apologize to Dios Mays," Teo called after him. He didn't stop. Teo chased Huemek down the steps. "Hair grows back." I only bring this quote up because we know that something happened between Teo and Dios Mays, but we don't know what. This is not the only time it comes up, and I want to know what happened. Now, we are heading to Soul Temple. The temple is on an island in the middle of a lake surrounded by these big old mountains, and it houses the Soul Stone, which powers all the other sunstones in Reino del Sol. Teo and Huemek arrive at the pre-opening ceremony banquet. Teo doesn't really know what to do with himself because everybody kind of has their own cliques, and he is like squarely outside of all the cliques. Surrounded by jades and gulls, Teo felt like he'd been shoved in a cage. Jade semidioses were sequestered in their own cities and didn't mingle much. Without Nia, the humiliating truth was that Teo didn't have any other friends to search out, so he stuck to Huemek's side. Sad boy. Sad boy, I love him. Teo smells apples and incense, and he turns to see a figure dressed in black waiting for him in the corner. This is Phantasma. She is a jade goddess who is the caretaker of the dead, who works very closely with Muerte, the gold goddess of death. And Phantasma looks like this little girl, a couple years younger than Teo, and she's always surrounded by these butterfly companions. Teo, our sweet boy, accidentally befriended her as a child when she was sitting all alone in the temple during one of the ceremonies, and he went up to her and just thought she needed a friend, so he gave her a chupa chup, a little candy. Phantasma was really confused, but accepted the offering, and in return, out from the ground sprouted a little skeletal hand with a marigold inside of it. And so ever since then, every time they see each other, they exchange gifts. Teo always gives her candies, but Phantasma's gifts get weirder and weirder, like every time they interact. And so this time, when Teo gives her the chupa chup, another little hand pops up and there's a mouse skull. He's genuinely very thankful, but like in his brain, he's like, where am I gonna put this now? Teo wants to search for Nia, but he is pulled back into the crowd when his mom reappears. Before he can get away from his mom and Huemek, they're stopped by Dios Mala Suerte, the god of bad luck. When he comes up to them, he is like, "Oh, Quetzal and Teo, two of my favorite people." Internally, Teo equates Mala Suerte to like the weird uncle that you have, but he doesn't say it out loud because like you don't want to insult the god of bad luck. Like that is just common sense. Quetzal and Mala Suerte are talking. Teo says hello to one of Mala Suerte's kids, Shio. Shio is 13, so he is eligible to compete in the Sunbearer Trials this year. Teo vaguely knows him, but like not well, because he's a very like shy kid, like very much like in his own little world, like in the back of the room, like kind of like not wanting to draw attention to himself. And before much can happen in this conversation, they are interrupted by Verdad and Chisme, who are the children of Diosa Comunion, Diosa of Community. Verdad asks Teo if she can talk to him and ask some questions about the Lumbre twins, the twins, and how they saved him from the fire this afternoon. Like I said, everybody knows about the fire now. And Teo is not having it. He's like, there was a fire. They put it out, and that is all he's giving. Chisme takes a very much more aggressive approach. Super dismissive of anything anybody says, especially because they're jades and they're like a waste of his time. Malasuerte goes, at what point does journalism become harassment? Chisme, being the dick that he is, just goes, I haven't figured it out. At least we can get a picture of all the jade rejects in a dark corner. I hate him. It is wholly unnecessary. And when he's like, oh, let's go interview some real celebrities, and like turns to walk away, one of the photographers that are with him and Verdad drops their camera and a lens just like shatters. As somebody who works in film and photography, let me tell you, lenses are not cheap. Malasuerte just goes, whoops. And Teo knows that despite having a weird uncle, it is good to have him on your side. Everybody kind of splits off and moves on, moves about the little banquet, and we finally meet Nia. Nia basically barrels into Teo and like scoops him up. As I mentioned earlier, she is the daughter of Thierry, and I like to describe her as a golden retriever, but like the size of a horse. She is like 6'5", hella muscular, and just really likes to show it off, because who wouldn't? If you have all those muscles, use them, girl. While Teo's regalia is like these nice little pants and a shirt and like this big old thing and a cape, hers is just like a skirt and a bandeau top, and even that she thinks is too much. To further describe her vibe, this is just a quote I think sums her as a person up nicely. Listen, I'm shredded. It's not right to cover it up. It's bad enough they make me wear this. Scowling, she tugged at her white bandeau top. I don't see why my brothers can have their titties out, but I can. Theirs are even bigger than mine, she announced loudly, throwing her hands up and getting looks from a group of nearby priests. There was no filter between Nia's head and her mouth. She just thought thoughts and said words. Basically, she is a himbo, and I love her. Wayback leaves them to go like do the rounds, and he's like, behave, and both of them together are even worse than Teo alone. And they're like, no, we're not gonna get into any trouble. What are you talking about? Okay, if the lighting in my hair changed slightly, just ignore that. We're shooting this on multiple days. The continuity will be a little whack, but we're gonna get through it. And then the two of them go off and get something to eat. Aurelio and Aristella arrive, and the whole room is abuzz with chatter about them and about the fire, because everybody knows about the fire. And everybody's also talking about how likely it is that the two of them will be selected to compete, and how one of them will likely be the Sunbearer. Their mom, Diosa Lumbre, is head of the academy, so she is like in charge of all training all of the gold heroes, and her bloodline is notorious for winning the trials. I think I'm gonna have to start a counter for every time Teo thirsts after Aurelio, because we get another nice description of our little fire boy. There's always something about Aurelio. The glow of his skin, the burning intensity of his eyes, that made Teo wonder if he was favored by Sol. They were all half gods, but it was like Aurelio had been touched by the sun itself. Like if Teo looked at him for too long, he might burn up from the inside out. Oh, my sweet boy, that is called a crush. That's what it feels like to have a crush on someone. Because Nia goes to the academy with these guys and like knows them and sees them on a daily basis, she's just like, ugh, they are so annoying. She is the highest ranking gold semidios under these three, so Teo feels like it's absolutely inevitable that she's gonna get picked for the trials. And despite how strong and talented she is, Teo is still worried. People have gotten hurt and died before, and he doesn't want to be there like watching from the sidelines if that happens or if she loses. Nia, Teo said carefully, do you want to be chosen for the trials? Nia bit her lip. I know they're just more gold showboating, but they're also, I don't know, important? I mean, it's an honor, right? To risk your life for this? Teo asked, gesturing around the room, this meaning the pomp and circumstance of it all, the gold. No, not for this, Nia said, shaking her head. For our people. To uphold soul sacrifice and keep Reino del Sol safe. Teo held his tongue. The worst possible scenario consumed his thoughts. His best friend laid on the altar at the end of the trials, and Teo unable to do anything but watch. So while Teo is having a crisis about Nia maybe dying, she sees Ocello enter the room and says that the triad of douchebaggery is complete. Ocello is the child of Dios Guerrero, the Dios of war, who has the head of a jaguar. So their powers is that they have a lot of those jaguar traits and can like kind of transform. They've got some claws and like super strong and stuff. Teo tells us that Aurelio and Aristella were pompous elitists, yes, but Ocello was an obnoxious narcissist. A small group of jade demigods chatted in a group, blocking Ocello from where Chisme and their dad were fawning over Aurelio and Aristella. Instead of asking them to move, or just going around them like a normal person, Ocello shouldered their way right through, sending the semidioses stumbling out of their way. Basically, they're an asshole. They're watching this all happen, and then Teo, our sweet, mischievous boy, gets a look on his face and asks Nia, hey, how about sending Ocello down the stairs? Like, let's send them on a little trip. Literally. Nia is game, and with her power to manipulate metals, she, like, pulls on the gold buckles on Ocello's shoes, and they go whoop, and tumble down the stairs. Our little miscreants are laughing hysterically when Quaymac just like appears behind them again. It's like they could have gotten hurt. They didn't though. See? Nia said, gesturing up to Ocello, who's red-faced and stomping away. Yeah, nothing but their ego, Teo added, trying to hold back a laugh. Nia nodded. Probably why they fell over in the first place. Big head, Teo agreed. Very top-heavy. I love their relationship. They play off each other so well. They just get into shit together, and I love them. Waymac's like, well, they're none of my business because I'm looking after you two, and it's time for the opening ceremony. Nia is very excited about this, and guess what? Teo is still nervous. Not for himself, but for Nia, because he knows she's getting picked. We meet Luna, the moon goddess. I unfortunately do not have a picture of her, and I did not think about printing out a picture of the moon, so I don't have that with me today. Regardless of having her up on the board or not, she is the voice of soul, because how does the moon shine light? It reflects the light from the sun, so it makes sense. She gives a brief recount of the history of the trials and soul sacrifice, and she reminds everyone that out of the 10 semidioses selected to compete, the winner will be crowned the Sunbearer for the next decade, and the person who is ranked the lowest at the end of the trials will be sacrificed. Their body will be melted down to help refuel the sunstones. And with that happy note, the ceremony begins. All of the usual suspects are selected. First, it is Ocello, and then Marino, and then the twins. Otzi, who's the daughter of Tormentoso, the dios of weather. And then it is Xochi, the semidiosa of spring, daughter of Primavera. And then it is Desi, son of diosa Amor. So far, it's all been gold, and there's only 3 spots left. For a split second, Teo was like, oh my god, there is a chance that Nia could escape this. She might not be selected. And then, of course, the sunbeam crown appears on her head, and she is selected as the 8th contestant. Teo's trying super, super hard not to panic because it's Nia. It's his best friend, but she's also super strong and super badass. And then, much too close for Teo's comfort, there's a flash of light, and a sunbeam crown appears over Shio's head. Everyone kind of loses their shit because Jades don't get selected to compete. It's been 130 years since the last one was selected, and remember, they died. And then things get worse for Teo. Another flash. Too close. Too bright and disorienting. Teo squinted. Across the circle, Nia stared at him, alarmed. For some reason, he sought out Aurelio. The boy's lips were softly parted, eyes wide and looking right at him. The most emotion Teo had seen on Aurelio's face in years. Over the growing noise of the crowd, Teo heard his mom gasp, but he didn't know why. He went to push his feather circlet back into place, but when Teo reached up, his fingers touched the cold rays of a sunburst crown. Not only was Shio the first Jade to be selected in 130 years, but 2 Jades will be competing in this year's Sunbearer Trials. Teo is, rightfully, freaked the fuck out. After the ceremony, Luna and his mom are like trying to talk him down, but he is still panicking. The Golds have been training to do this for years, and guess what? In case you forgot, somebody dies at the end of the trials. Since he's a Jade, it's very likely that he will end up at the sharp end of the knife when this is all over. Malasuerte also enters the conversation and goes up to Luna, is like, Soul cannot have my son for their games. Like, absolutely not, end of story. And Luna is like, are you questioning Soul? Soul doesn't make mistakes, and all of them were chosen for a reason. Malasuerte does not like that answer, and things begin to escalate until Shio steps in and tells his dad, like, there's nothing we can do about this. I'm competing no matter what, and I just want to get it over with. He is our sad boy, and Teo feels really, really bad for him. Compared to Shio, Teo's situation didn't seem nearly as dire. Shio had only turned 13 a couple months ago. He hadn't even hit his growth spurt yet and still had round baby cheeks. Shio was only a jade, and a son of Mala Suerte at that. What awful luck. Sad boy. Sweet, sweet sad boy. With that resolve, Luna takes Teo and Shio into the temple where they'll be staying until they leave for the first trial tomorrow. And Teo's trying to do the mental math on how to run away from this, but knows that it's inevitable that he competes. So he just needs to go through with it and stay high enough in the rankings to survive. She eventually takes them to part of the temple where all the other competitors are waiting, and all eyes are turned on our two jade boys. Nia is super pumped and is like, Teo, we get to hang out now. We get to do all the cool shit together. And Teo's like, great, this wasn't how I planned on doing the cool shit. Luna is showing them their quarters for the night, and Teo fills Nia in on the conversation between his mom, Luna, and Mala Suerte. Together, they decide that they should try and take care of Shio during the trials, because not only is he one of the youngest competitors, but Teo feels really, really bad for Shio and kind of has this older brother mentality, like need to protect him a little bit, because right now it feels like Soul just chose the two of them to end up being the sacrifices. Or one of them, I guess. They all go off to their individual rooms, and Teo is surprised to find that he has a visitor. Huemak has snuck into this part of the temple and is waiting for him. Huemak gripped his shoulders and squeezed them tight. Be quick on your feet around Shochi and steer clear of water, or else Marino and Atsi will use it against you. He spoke so quickly, Teo struggled to keep up. Don't get near Desi during competition. You can outsmart Ocello. They may have brute strength, but they lack tactical strategy. You're clever and you're fast. Use it to your advantage. And Teo, he blinked up at Huemak, at a total loss for words. Huemak leveled him a hard stare. Stay out of Aurelio and Aristella's way. Very ominous, very eyebrow-raising. What does this all mean? Who knows? Just kidding. I know. I'm going to tell you all about it. Huemak dips right as Nia arrives to ask Teo if he wants to go and raid the kitchen, which he does, and they decide to ask Shio if he wants to come along with them. When they stop at his room and ask him if he wants to come, he's like, are you sure? People tend to avoid me because they think I'm bad luck. Sweet, sweet boy number 2. This made my heart ache for him. Well, Teo was like, of course we want you to come. Nia gets distracted by a 3-ring binder that Shio has open on his bed. Shio panics when Nia asks about the binder, but Teo recognizes that it's a bunch of hero trading cards. All of the gold semidioses have cards that list their strengths, weaknesses, abilities, etc., etc., what you see here. And Teo had a super small collection of cards a few years ago, but once he opened up a pack one day and Aurelio's card was inside, he noped right out of that situation and gave them all away. And as he's thinking about this, Teo realizes that this may give Shio a little bit of an advantage, a little bit more of an edge than he assumed that he'd have. Seeking into the kitchen, they run into Dios Maze, remember, from the incident, and Diosa Pandolce. Teo also notes here that Maze used to have like super, super long cornrows that like went all the way down his back, but doesn't anymore and has like a super short hairstyle now. So we know that fire and hair was involved in the accident, but we don't know exactly what caused the accident. And I want to know. Maze still holds a grudge and is like, I am not making any more food for anybody, and leaves. So Teo looks at Dulce and pulls out the Quetzalon priest would always make me hot chocolate whenever I can't sleep, and I think I'm just really missing home right now. And she has a heart that melts, gets the 3 of them some nice hot chocolate. So our little trio is having a great time drinking their hot chocolate when all of a sudden this agitating, grating voice starts talking down the hall. They shouldn't be here, Aurelio said, his voice low and gruff. It's not right. They're jades. The words hit Teo like a punch to the chest. At least we don't have to worry about one of our own losing, came Aristella's voice, loud and clear as they passed by the door. It'd suck if the sacrifice was one of us. Yeah, it'd be easy for us to keep them at the bottom. That time it was Ocello. We can just focus on winning. Nia wants to fight, but unfortunately, Teo stops her. Overhearing that conversation throws Shio into a bit of a funk, but Teo and Nia reassure him that they're just assholes, like talking big game. And Nia goes off about how Aristella and Ocello are the worst. Aurelio is basically like a robot in class that just follows them around and like blank face. Then she looks at Teo and apologizes and says, I know you guys used to be friends. And Shio's like, you were friends? Teo gives him the general, like, we were friends when we were kids, but not anymore. We haven't talked to each other in a really long time. But in reality, when they were little, Teo was like super, super outgoing, and Aurelio was just like this really, really shy kid. And much like Phantasma, Teo decided that Aurelio needed a friend, and so they started playing together. They were totally inseparable for a long time. Then Aurelio started talking about getting to go to the academy and how excited he was. And Teo got super, super excited too. Then Quetzal had to break it to him that he does not get to go to the academy. Only golds get to go. Right before leaving for the academy, Aurelio promised that he'd tell Teo everything. But the first time they saw each other after Aurelio started, he was with his sister and Ocello, and they were just big jerks to Teo, and Aurelio did nothing about it. He just stayed quiet and said nothing. Teo felt really betrayed by that, and they haven't really spoken since then. And after hearing the short and sweet version of that, Shio tells the two of them about these girls who would pick on him at school and call his hair like, oh, super curly and pretty, even after he came out as trans. And then one day, the three girls that were picking on him got lice so bad they had to shave their hair off because, you know, karma and bad luck. In this conversation, Teo finds that he relates to that. For the first time that night, Shio smiled. Teo grinned back. It was nice to meet someone who had gone through the same kind of bullshit as him. Nia was his best friend, but as a cisgender girl and a gold, there was a lot of his life experiences that she wouldn't get, but Shio could. So after hearing that whole conversation, Teo decides that he, Nia, and Shio should all team up, not just as like the misfit kitchen gang, but to also take down Aurelio, Aristella, and Ocello at the trials. Shio's a little worried that he's gonna bring the group down, but the other two assure him that with his like encyclopedic knowledge of all the competitors' strengths and weaknesses, like he's gonna be a great addition to the team. A sudden lightness made Teo feel giddy. Then it's us against them. Now, being in the trials didn't feel like a death sentence. Now they had a chance to really prove something, not just to the golds, but to everyone. The next morning, when Teo wakes up and go to breakfast, he sees Nia and she goes, why aren't you in your gear? And he's like, what gear? He finally looks around and sees that everybody else is in these like really high-tech looking athletic wear while he is still in his pajamas. Aurelio, Aristella, and Ocello all walk in and we get another description of how hot Aurelio is in his training gear. Meanwhile, Aurelio just like looks at Teo and just goes, where are your clothes? Ocello adds a really, really unhelpful comment about like, oh, are you gonna compete in your sweatpants? And Nia, being the lovable himbo that she is, lunges at them. We love this sweet girl protecting her friends. These two are about to get into a full-on brawl when Luna walks in and is like, is there a problem? No one wants to invoke her wrath, so they all come down, and Luna tells Teo that he's gonna come with her to get fitted for his uniform. Now, these are the uniforms that all the golds use at the academy, but since Teo and Shio don't go to the academy, Shio's already gotten fitted for his uniform, and now it's Teo's turn. As he is trying his uniform on, Luna keeps telling him about how it's like the most high-tech athletic wear and like will hold up really, really well against damage, like better than his demigod skin. And Teo's like, damage? And Luna looks at him and these are the Sunbearer Trials. And Teo's like, yeah, how could I forget? There are also two holes like in the back of the uniform, and when he asks what they're for, Luna tells him that they are for his wings. Teo wants an entirely new shirt without the wing holes, but Luna tells him that he'll need to use them in the trials. He insists that he can do the trials without them, and Luna doesn't argue, but she just like gives him this look like, are you serious? And she tells him it's fine, he doesn't have to use his wings, he can just keep them tucked under his shirt, but she is pretty doubtful that he'll be able to complete the trials without them. He gets changed into his brand new uniform and is sent off to a photo shoot and small interview with Verdad, who is genuinely interested that there's going to be two Jades competing, and Chisme, who is still a dick. Teo does the absolute bare minimum for the interview and the photo shoot, which ends up being a little awkward, then goes to find Nia and Shio again. All of the competitors are just kind of in this holding pattern waiting, and Aurelio sees Shio's bracelet, which is supposed to ward off bad luck, so Aurelio asks about it and does seem like genuinely interested, but because Teo is feeling these protective big brother vibes for Shio, he snaps a little at Aurelio. It's for good luck, Teo snapped, but Aurelio didn't even glance in his direction. Why do you need a bracelet to ward off bad luck if your dad is mala suerte? Why? Are you scared of me? Shio asked, a hint of a challenge in his voice. Aurelio said nothing. The two watched each other for a moment, but then Aurelio shook his head and turned away. A surprised laugh jumped in Teo's chest. Damn, I knew I liked you for a reason, Nia said with an approving nod. With Teo and Shio in their new uniforms and everybody gathered together, Luna announces that the first trial is going to be held in La Cumbre, which is Nia's hometown. And of course there is fighting, particularly from Osella, who's like, it's not fair, she's gonna have the advantage, and Nia's like, it sucks to suck, dude. Luna, having none of this shit, tells them that the cities were picked way in advance, so like nobody has the advantage. For the duration of the trials, the competitors will be traveling by boat from city to city. Luna takes them aboard, gives them a little tour. She tells them that on the boat, they'll get to know each other, they'll eat together. Teo is really, really disappointed about this because he wants to go out into the cities and eat and try all the things and just like experience someplace other than Kethlon. But Luna has a very strict itinerary with designated exploration time. In this moment, Teo realizes that this is also probably Aurelio and Aristella's nightmare. Being fire semidioses, being surrounded by water on all sides, probably doesn't feel good, probably isn't great. Teo finds this a little funny and he's like, well, I don't care, obviously. Spoiler alert, maybe he does care a little bit about what one of the twins is feeling. Luna gives them a tour of the boat. She shows them where their rooms are and she shows them to the training room on board. All the girls are pumped and just like start working out. Meanwhile, Teo and Shio are just like super uncomfortable and don't know what to do with themselves. Teo thinks that all the machines look like torture devices and Shio also doesn't know what's happening. And Teo tells him, well, these idiots can figure it out. Like, I'm sure we can too. So this boy, our sweet, stupid boy, decides that he is just gonna deadlift 200 pounds. That is probably a good place to start, right? Fun fact, and I don't know if this makes me just as stupid as Teo, but after reading this, I was like, could I deadlift 200 pounds? Shockingly, I did it and I didn't hurt myself while doing it. Aurelio sees Teo go over to the weights and start to like get ready to deadlift and he's like, that is not how you deadlift. Teo is absolutely filled to the brim with spite. He remembers the, oh, they shouldn't be there conversation from last night and does not want Aurelio's help at all. He can do this himself. He knows how to pick up weights. And Aurelio lingers there until Aristella calls him back and he just like leaves Teo because clearly he doesn't want advice. So just to prove that he can, Teo grabs onto the bar and when he goes to lift, darts of pain just shoot up his entire body and he immediately drops the weights, getting everybody's attention, including Desi, who is deaf. And she was like, are you okay? And Teo's like, we gotta go. Thankfully, because of Teo's half-godly healing, he is able to just like take a shower and rest for a little bit and then it's perfectly fine. Except his pride. His pride is a little bit wounded. This is also a moment where we see Teo really, really struggling with his wings. They are a part of him and they're from his mom and they're from his heritage, but he also doesn't really feel like they're his. And after that whole scene, he goes out to find Nia and Shio again as they approach La Cumbre. They are getting pretty close to the city because it is one that is a lot closer to Sol's temple, but the boat is moving astronomically slow, and that's because this is a big deal. These 10 children are fighting to see which one of them will kill another one of them in order to make sure the world doesn't end. So people are like lining up on the riverbanks, like waving and cheering, and everybody's just kind of like chilling. Marino, Atsi, and Shochi are just like messing around and he's trying to spray them with water. The twins are just like off in their own little world. Ocello is just like living it up, like waving at everybody because they cannot ignore the attention. Everybody else is treating this like a vacation, except Teo and Shio because they're about to go to the first trial and they're a little worried. Marino is trying to shoot Desi, Atsi, and Shochi with like water, except at one point he misses Desi and accidentally sprays the twins. Remember what I said earlier about them not being super comfortable, completely surrounded by water? Aristella is literally steaming and chases the culprits away. Meanwhile, Aurelio's just like trying to shake the water out of his phone, and Teo sees this pathetic little look on his face that he recognizes from when they were kids. Other kids would be playing and Aurelio just like wouldn't know how to start playing with the other kids. And Teo wonders if his and Aristella's tendency to isolate is by choice or if Aurelio really hasn't changed that much and still is like this uncomfortable kid who just wants to join all the other kids but doesn't know how. Surprising himself as well as Nia and Shio, he goes up to Aurelio and asks what he was watching on his phone pre-splash, and Aurelio tells him it's baking videos. Teo thinks he's being sarcastic, so he's like, fine, don't tell me, and walks away. They finally make it to La Cumbre, and it is time for the first trial. Everyone is speculating what the first trial might be, and Ocello just goes, what if we get to fight a god? And Aurelio just goes, well, that's not going to happen because of what happened 90 years ago. And Teo's like, what happened 90 years ago? Nia tells him that part of the training at the academy is to look at old trials and like use those as case studies to practice. Teo's like, great, another advantage the golds have over us. And Shio just like goes absolutely silent. Teo's like, ah, shit, gotta like lock Miner's energy down because Shio is clearly super, super nervous and like he wants to be there to support him. And so they head to the arena for the first trial. The arena has a small, super steep mountain that has a bunch of waterfalls and like rock faces and jungle, and it is surrounded by this big old body of water. And at the very, very top is a slab of gold with Soul's glyph on it. It's overwhelming for anybody to like walk into a stadium or an arena, but when you are at the center of it, it is like even more overwhelming when you know your life is on the line. To make matters worse, all the spectators in the arena are like waving around these gold banners, and there are no jade banners anywhere. I mean, I would feel shitty too. They get to a platform where they get to like reunite with their parents before and after the trial. Quetzal looks just as anxious as Teo feels. Luna tells them that for the first trial, they will be racing over the mountain, collecting 10 glyphs that represent their city. Once you like tap each of the glyphs, you just have to get to the top. Like it is a timed trial. So they are all also given these like watches that will buzz when they're running out of time. She also tells them that they can't cross into the other competitors' sections of the mountain, but Ocello and Aristella see that as a challenge to find loopholes in order to sabotage the other contestants. With that instruction, they all line up and get ready to start. Teo can see the first stone slab with his mom's glyph on it, and he realizes that they look a little too much like headstones, and with that, the trial begins. Things start out okay, but Teo immediately knows that he is not a runner in any shape or form, especially with his binder on and his wing being constrained. Up above him, Otzi and Aristella are like duking it out with lightning and fireballs. Teo feels so incredibly out of his league because Otzi is 13, yet here she is just like throwing lightning. Meanwhile, he's just like trying to maintain a consistent running pace. He comes across this cliff that he needs to cross to get to his next glyph. He has to use a vine as like a rope swing to get across because his wings are A, not an option, and B, it's been years since he has used his wings and he isn't willing to test his relationship with gravity in this moment, but he's doing it. He made it across, he gets to his next glyph and keeps going. Slowly but surely, he is making his way up the mountain. His next glyph is right by this big boulder when all of a sudden rocks come flying down from above. Ocello, who is still standing in their section, is just hurling boulders at Teo. Ocello is just standing up there fuming, and Teo decides it's a great idea to taunt them back and just be like, oh, are you angry because you're so short? Okay, I just looked up because they have their heights on here. Ocello is 5'8", Teo is 5'10", your girl here is 5'2". 5'8" is not short. I don't know what Teo's talking about. Regardless, he instantly regrets that. Their nails morphed into claws and 4 heavy canines protruded from their mouth. When Ocello bared their teeth, their amber eyes bulged. Teo immediately regretted everything. How could he compete with this? Quick side note, as I was writing this, my friend Coral was sitting across from me and I was like talking about it and she just goes, damn, bringing a bird to a cat fight. And I lost it. Before Ocello can hurl this boulder down at Teo, Teo's watch buzzes, which means that somebody has finished. And it also means that he needs to hurry his ass up if he doesn't want to be last. So he runs. The terrain gets more dangerous and more treacherous as he goes up, and his watch starts buzzing more and more because more people are finishing. His adrenaline is working against him and he's a little panicked at this point. And then the trail just becomes rocks, like big old boulders. Teo needs to jump across these to get to the next glyph, but he slips and starts to fall a little bit. He barely catches onto the edge of one of these rocks, and he's trying to claw his way up, but keeps on slipping. I rock climb recreationally. Let me tell you, even though I am only falling like 15 feet onto this 2-foot deep mat, it is still slightly terrifying when you're just like up there hanging on, and I'm not falling off a cliff. So yes, this is mildly terrifying. He finally pulls himself up, gives himself a moment to breathe, and starts to go for the next glyph, which is like tucked behind a waterfall. He only has 2 more to get, and the end is in sight. He can see the other competitors on the top. He is so close. But when he goes to touch it, the rocks under his feet give way and he falls again. And standing above him, instead of crossing the finish line, Ocello just decided to throw more rocks at the other competitors. Teo's heart stopped. Ocello grinned, their eyes black as pits. They chucked the slate and Teo flinched. But Ocello didn't throw the chunk of rock at him. Instead, it crashed into the section to Ocello's right, Shio's path. Our sweet boy Teo is pissed. Shio can't defend himself, and Ocello just decided to be an ass. Ocello could have easily just crossed into the finish line, but instead he decided to mess with Shio instead. Teo knows that he can't level the playing field, especially when Ocello has the high ground. But Teo remembers what Climax said and knows that he can outsmart them. Teo uses the little strength he has left to flex his wings, break his binder, and propel himself to the next little outcropping on the mountain. To everyone's disbelief, he starts to fly. The crowd is shocked, Ocello's shocked, and to seal the deal, Teo just kicks him in the head as he flies past. Teo is living. He hasn't flown since he was little, and even then he couldn't get up very high, and he's forgotten how good it feels to stretch his wings. Up at the finish, Nia is like, "Holy shit!" And Teo's like, "What?" She just goes, "Look at your wings!" Teo hesitates because he has traditionally avoided looking at his wings, but when he looks back, he sees the beautiful iridescent blues and greens of the male quetzal. He is absolutely joyous in this moment. But that moment only lasts for a split second, because for the second time, there's another flash of light way too close to Teo. Otzi has hit Teo with a bolt of lightning, then he is falling out of the sky and crashing into the cold water below. Post being retrieved from the water and everybody else finishing the trial, Teo is standing with his mom and she is just absolutely gushing over his wings. Despite the humiliation of getting struck by lightning and falling into the water, nothing can detract from how excited Teo is and how he feels like his wings finally match him. Everybody else is observing his new wings too. The way Desi openly smiled at his wings made Teo blush. Desi signed something, and Teo was about to apologize because he didn't know sign language when someone said, "They're very handsome." Aurelio stood behind Teo with his head tipped to the side, studying the wings, while Auristella was distracted talking to their mom. Teo's breath hitched. What? Aurelio's attention snapped to his eyes. He stood up straighter. That's what Desi said. The way I snorted when I first read that. Quetzal calls Teo's wings stubborn, and he's like, yeah, it took them long enough. And she tells him, I suspect they refused to change until you properly accepted they were a part of you, his mom reasoned with a knowing look. Teo glanced at Aurelio again, but he had already gone back to his sister. I didn't necessarily need to include that quote to get the point across, but I thought it was an interesting formatting, comparison, parallel, because obviously writing is a very intentional thing, and to put what Quetzal is saying about, like, you needed them, right next to Teo looking at Aurelio, I just thought that was interesting. Still, there are bigger issues at hand. Seeing as Teo fell off the mountain, by accident, he thinks that he's going to come in last because he failed epically. Luna announces that Sol has determined the rankings, and the priests roll this big stone slab that has all of the competitors' glyphs, and then the glyphs start to move into the ranking for the first trial. In first place, we have Aristella. In a close second, we have Aurelio. Then we have Shochi, Nia, Otzi, Desi, Orino, Teo, Shio, and Ocello. Ocello is fuming and demands to know why they're last. Luna shoots them "Are you questioning Sol's rankings?" And that very quickly shuts them up. Because they were throwing rocks down the mountain, destroying other competitors' glyphs, it made it impossible for some of the competitors to actually finish the trial. They also created a rock slide that endangered some of the priests that were waiting at the bottom of the mountain. Luna reminds them all that it is their job as semidioses to protect the people of Reino do Sol and not to harm them. Ocello is red-faced, but shuts up, and they're a little bit ashamed, as they should be. And what is absolutely amazing about this is that neither of the Jades are on the bottom. They're very, very close, but they are not the bottom. Teo is amazed that neither he or Shio ended up in last place, but knows it's a little too good to be true. Like, the next trial could be totally worse because the only reason that neither of them were in last place was because Ocello messed up so badly. And next time they might not be so lucky. Back on the boat, Shio and Nia are still gushing about Teo's wings, and Nia tells him that if he learns how to use them, that could give him a leg up in the trials, and Teo is a little prickly and apprehensive about it, but he knows that today he saved his and Shio's lives. He can't afford to fail again. Even though they're not at the bottom, they're still ranked pretty low, and one bad move could easily end up with them becoming the sacrifice. Being the good, sweet big brother figure that Teo is, he checks on Shio, who's like, well, I'm just really glad I didn't get myself crushed under a rock slide, so I consider that to be pretty lucky. Oh, sweet boy. Oh, sweet boy. Not dying is the bare minimum. That shouldn't be lucky. That's called living. Nia jumps in and starts talking about her badassery and how Ocello, when they got up to the finish line, just kind of stopped and then turned and started throwing boulders at them. Apparently, Aurelio tried to stop Ocello, but it seemed like they couldn't hear him, and they ended up causing the rock slide. And at that point, Shio just wedged himself between some rocks to not get smashed. Well, at least you didn't get snapped to a pulp, Nia offered, trying to sound optimistic. You don't have any semidios powers that can help you in the trials? Teo asked, feeling a bit desperate for some kind of solution. Shio shook his head. Nothing useful like magic weapons or wings. Teo rubbed his hand over his face, hit with a fresh wave of exhaustion. The odds were not in his favor. It was like Shio was set up for failure. They get to dinner, and everybody is exhausted from the first trial, and it's the first time that Teo sees the gold semidioses acting like normal people. But things get a little tense because Teo's still figuring out how to maneuver his wings and accidentally smacks Ocello in the face. Arisilla drops something. I don't know what. For some reason, I couldn't figure that out when I was reading it. Since Shio is standing right there, she is like, ew, get this toddler away from me. His bad luck's gonna rub off on me. Teo sees red. He tries to stand up to Aristella, but she shouts that he shouldn't even be here. They're not real competition and that they're the default sacrifices. And Nia, bless her heart, is like, oh yeah, and you think one of the three of you will win? Because remember, she is ranked 4th. She is a badass. And Ocello tells her that she's only here because her dad is Sol's ex-boyfriend. These two are about to get into it again when Luna walks in the room and just throws a sandal that smacks them all in the head and then sends them off to their rooms. I don't know if she just goes up and bops them one at a time, but the way I imagine this is I imagine she just threw the sandal and it boomeranged around to each one of them. I don't know, but it made me laugh out loud. Our little trio splits off together, and Nia's like, see, this is what I have to deal with all the time, but usually it isn't this bad. It's probably just the stress of the trials getting to everybody. But Shio apologizes because he thinks it's his fault, and Teo's like, no way, they're just assholes, dude. And he realizes it isn't just enough to survive. He desperately wants to take down Ocello, Aricella, and Aurelio. And their best chance to do that is for Nia to win, and for our boys to stay out of the bottom. So they hunker down with Shio's binder with all the hero cards and start going over everybody's strengths and weaknesses. Every gold has their natural powers, but then at the academy, they kind of hone in on them. Both of the twins are fireproof, but Aristella is an igniter and Aurelio is a manipulator, so they have slightly different skills. And since Aurelio can't ignite flames, he wears these little flint-tipped gloves on his fingers to start fires. And Ocello's powers are just jaguar. Their weakness is problem solving, while the twins is, you guessed it, water. Shio also shows them these little graphs that everybody has. Depending on the way it's weighted, it shows if they are more like physically strong or like mentally capable. It's kind of tucked behind Nia, but Ocelo's graph is very heavily weighted on one side. Aristella and Aurelio's is like more evenly distributed, and our sweet Nia, bless her heart, asks where their trading cards are. And both the boys look at her and like, we don't have them. They don't make trading cards for Jade Semidioses. As discussed previously, the last Jade to compete was killed 130 years ago. Sometimes they do retro packs, but Shio doesn't have it, so instead he pulls up a video from that Sunbearer ceremony. The Sunbearer that year was a child of Lumbre. Remember, she has a bloodline of winners. The sacrifice was a girl named Paloma. As they're watching it, Teo squints and realizes that Paloma has wings. Who is her godly parent standing behind her? It's Mama Quetzal. His mom has never mentioned Paloma to him. Teo thinks it's because she didn't want to scare him or because she just like couldn't bring it up. Memories flash through his mind. How she'd shield Teo from watching the sacrifice 10 years ago. How terrified she looked when Sol selected him to compete. Her iron grip and the relief in her voice when he passed the first trial. His mom had been carrying this on her own, alone in a city where she was the only immortal, where none of the people knew or even remembered her fallen daughter. Teo really doesn't want to put his mom through losing another child again. So when Nia goes to bed, he's even more determined to make this whole thing work. He and Shio go down to the training room where Shio promptly falls asleep in the corner. And Teo decides he needs to figure out how to strengthen his wings so he can fly. But he has no idea where to start. After trying and failing to fly many, many times, Teo is frustrated and like, why won't you cooperate? And his wings just like smack him in the face. This is not an important detail, but I just love that the wings have their own personality. He thinks that he's probably not strong enough to fly, so he tries picking up some weights, not 200 pounds, and flying with them. That kind of seems to work, like the counterbalance. When he tries again, he's able to get like 10 feet off the ground before Aurelio walks in. He was dressed in the Academy provided workout gear. Black shorts and a tank top that covered very little of his well-built frame. Oh, our boy is down so bad and he doesn't even know it. Teo tries really, really hard to stay in the air, but his wings cramp up and he falls. He expects Aurelio to be a jerk about it, but instead he asks Teo if he needs some help. Teo, being Teo, refuses. And because of his pride, he debates on just like giving up and leaving the training room, but ultimately decides like he just needs to stick it out. Like, so what if Aurelio's here? It doesn't matter. After a few attempts, Aurelio tells Teo that he isn't extending his wings all the way, and instinctively, Teo snaps back. Aurelio isn't fazed by this and continues to give Teo corrections, and Teo's like, when did you become an expert in wings? And walks away. But when Aurelio isn't looking, Teo tries to do as he says and fully extend his wings. Lo and behold, something clicks, and his wings extend further than he's ever gotten them to extend before. Quote, "The only thing Teo hated more than being wrong was Aurelio being right." Seeing as his advice worked, Aurelio suggests that Teo maybe try out some stretches because you can't just like jump right into, I don't know, deadlifting 200 pounds. And Teo is like, oh my god, that is so boring. And Aurelio reminds him that if he pushes himself too hard, he's going to get hurt. And Teo's attitude shifts very quickly from this almost playful banter to being super defensive and like, why are you giving me advice out of the kindness of your heart? I thought you wanted to win. Quote, "I do," he said, maybe more to himself than Teo. "I do, but I don't want to be Sunbearer just because you..." He cut himself off. What was that about? Just because I'm what? Just because I'm a jade? Just because I'm weak enough to not be worth playing against? His voice wavered. "This isn't a game," Aurelio said, frowning. Teo's chest tightened. "I know that." "Then why do you act like it is?" Aurelio asked, expression deadly serious. Teo thought maybe he really wanted an answer, that he wasn't just trying to get under Teo's skin. At this point, Shio wakes up and is watching all of this happen from the corner, and Teo is frustrated because in his mind, it just seems like Aurelio and all his buddies are super excited to be murderers. Aurelio points out that without the sacrifice, the Obsidians would return and the world would end. And Teo counters with, well, if it's such an honor, why isn't the winner the sacrifice? Aurelio hesitates, and Teo doesn't think he's going to say anything. And then Aurelio comes out and says that it isn't a fair fight because the Golds have been training for this, and Teo and Shio have no idea what they're doing. If the Jades were trained like the Golds were, they'd actually do really well. Teo doesn't take this that way and says that Aurelio's just taking this way too seriously, which is counter to what he believed earlier, but I digress. And then Aurelio's emotion shifts from just this blank face to being a little fiery. Aurelio snaps at Teo and tells him that he isn't taking this seriously enough. Every ugly feeling Teo kept closed off and pushed away was dragged to the surface. Every time he felt not godly enough to be a Gold or too godly to be a boy, every cruel look from Aristella and the terrible laugh from Ocello, every time Aurelio turned his back on him, it twisted and churned and leapt to his mouth. You Golds run around pretending to be heroes when you're just bullies with a god complex, he spat. I'm trying to keep me and my friends alive. All you care about are the rankings and making mommy proud. Ooh. I forgot I had cheesecake. This is awesome. Aurelio says nothing. His eyes burn for a second and then the cool facade comes back down. He very bluntly tells Teo that he's going to get himself killed and then leaves. Shio, who again was watching all this play out, asks Teo if he's alright. Teo tells him that he's fine, but internally he's thinking that this was like a power play for Aurelio to get under his skin. In the moment he decides that he is not going to let Aurelio win whatsoever, and in order to take him down, he has to start acting like a Gold. The next morning, Teo wakes up and he is really sore, which is made even worse by the fact that Aurelio was right. He shouldn't push himself that hard. But Aurelio doesn't need to know that. Teo's not gonna admit it. But during breakfast, he's also just like watching Aurelio across the table, and Aurelio is pointedly ignoring him. Homegirl Nia calls Teo out for undressing Aurelio with his eyes, and Teo's like, I'm not looking at him like that, I'm looking at him with disdain. We are not convinced. And before the conversation can continue, Luna comes in and tells them that they're going to be spending the day at the La Cumbre hot springs, which Teo is excited about, before they have dinner at the temple, which he is not. They take these cool aerial trams up to the hot springs, and when they get there, it's surprisingly empty, which surprises Teo because Nia says that this is like a super popular place for people to go and chill in the hot springs, to hang out in the hot springs. When he asks about it, Nia tells him that they don't share space with mortals. If any of the dioses or semi-dioses are coming, they will clear out the hot springs so they can have it all to themselves. To Teo, this is a really weird concept because he's so ingrained in everything about Quetzalon that he can't imagine just like not being around mortals, and this weird separation feels like totally unnecessary. They get to the hot springs and it's exactly what you imagine when I say magical hot springs built into the side of a volcano. It's the first day after the trials, everybody is just relaxing and like decompressing, and then the twins, who are not getting in the water, step out of the locker room. Would you believe it when I said there's another description of how hot Aurelio looks? It wasn't like he hadn't seen their skin before. The twins' uniform were basically fancy crop tops, but Aurelio was entirely shirtless now, standing there like an actual god. Aurelio reached up and adjusted the knot of his hair, sunlight glistening on his warm brown skin. Had someone oiled him up? And how the hell did he get those side abs on his ribs? Oh no, Teo describing how sexy Aurelio is again? Who could have expected it? Everyone is doing their own thing, and eventually Aurelio separates from Ocello and Aristella and goes into this little sauna cave that is behind a waterfall. So Teo follows him, and then they are alone in the sauna. Teo takes a seat on a bench that's like far enough away from Aurelio that it's not supposed to be awkward, but it still is awkward. And he very quickly realizes that it is way too hot in here for him, while Aurelio's just like normal. But he looks over at Teo and is like, are you alright? And Teo's like, who are you, my mom? And Aurelio calls him stubborn because yes. And then he offers Teo some water because he's getting super red. Teo huffed. Fine. He snatched the bottle from Aurelio's hand. But not because I'm overheated. Right. I'm a normal amount of thirsty. Aurelio nodded. Sure. Teo felt his cheeks grow impossibly warmer. Thirsty as in like hydrated. Not relevant to the plot, but it made me giggle. Here is to more descriptions of hot Aurelio in book 2. After that, the conversation shifts to Aurelio asking Teo if he would want to be the Sunbearer. Teo hasn't considered this. Aurelio tells him that he's been thinking about what Teo said about the winner being the sacrifice, and Teo gets this like look on his face that Aurelio clearly reads and like
sees how uncomfortable Teo is, because, again, he thinks that he was picked to die. So this is an uncomfy topic for everybody, and the conversation fizzles out. Teo is kicking himself for following Aurelio in here and expecting to see a bit of the old Aurelio, who didn't seem quite as untouchable as he does now. So he decides he's down with the sauna and rejoins Nia and Shio. They question Teo about where he was, and Nia makes a two bros chilling in a sauna joke. And I read that for the first time, and I was like, I can't believe this. Post Hot Springs, everybody is going to the La Cumbre Temple for dinner. The temple itself looks super cool and is very much like a geode, where it's like all rocky and hard on the outside, but inside there's a bunch of gemstones and crystals inside, and it looks really, really cool. And Nia's super pumped because she's home. She gets to see her two older brothers and her dads. And Teo feels just a touch out of place because he's seeing Nia with her family, and that makes him very aware that his only, blood family is his mom. So when they all sit down, he tries to, sneak off to the end of the table, but Nia, being the uber sweet golden retriever, pulls Teo and Shio up and is like, oh, sit next to me up near the front of the table. During dinner, they learn that the next trial is going to be hosted by Diosa Fauna, the goddess of animals, and suddenly Teo's appetite is gone because, again, he's faced with the reality that this is not over. Just because he survived one trial doesn't mean he's going to survive the others. The next day, we are on the boat again, heading to the next trial. Our trio, once again, is discussing things. Teo is really, really nervous that he's going to follow in Paloma's footsteps, and he hasn't had a chance to, talk to his mom about all of this yet. And everybody else, minus Shio, is just very chill, having a good time going from one city to the next. And even though they're in last place, Ocello is taking a cat nap, out in the sun on the deck of the boat. As they're approaching the city, they task a group of toucans that Teo calls out to. Since he is the son of Quetzal and can talk to birds, they instantly love him. So he recruits them to go mess with Ocello, and they start squawking and waking Ocello up. And it's just a very fun moment, a little bit of a relief between the first and second trials for Teo and the gang. Since Fauna is the diosa of animals are very much in consideration throughout the entire city. There are doors for them in buildings, there's places for them to live. Animals are everywhere. Very similar to how a lot of the people in Quetzalán have bird companions, people here have animal companions. Our contestants arrive at the arena for trial number 2. Quetzal very quickly picks up on Teo's discomfort, and he takes this opportunity to ask her about Paloma. Quetzal is very taken aback because obviously she's never told Teo about Paloma, but she says that they're very similar. They're both troublemakers, feisty, brave, and that she did her best during the trials, and then she trails off. Teo reacted on instinct, pulling his mother down into a hug before the break in her voice turned into full-on tears. Though his mother was a diosa, looming larger than life, in that moment, Teo felt like the bigger one. Like his mother was a small, delicate thing that he needed to protect. She's so sad and worried about her sweet boy. She tells him that she was really scared to have another kid for a really, really long time. Teo's the first child she's had since Paloma, and Teo promises her that he won't let her go through that again. For the second trial, the contestants have to go onto this island to retrieve a baby alebrije, which are animals that are hybrids of a bunch of different animals and have a bunch of multicolored, intricate patterns. Get it past its mother, which is a truck-sized jaguar with big old fangs and bat wings, and bring the baby alebrije across the finish line. They all see that the mama alebrije is a jaguar, and Neo turns to Ocello and is like, "Is that your mom?" Everybody gets geared up, and Teo's worried, Shio's worried, everybody else seems ready to go, and so the trial begins. Teo instantly goes into strategy mode because he knows that they can't take the Mama Alebrije down, even though Nia's like, "Yes, I can." The twins are the first two on the island, and they start fighting with the Mama Jaguar. Ocello joins in and starts to fight it, which allows everybody else an opportunity to get onto the island. The twins make it to the nest with all the babies first, and Auristela accidentally sets the nest on fire. Aurelio gets this little gecko that can spit fire, and Auristela gets a green Cody with armadillo armor. And then they're turning around to get back across the bridge and get off the island. Because of Auristela's fire, the baby alebrijes are scrambling. Some are able to flee the nest, but others can't. Even the ones that do flee aren't going down without a fight. As the other contestants try to grab them, they're clawing and scratching and just being general nuisances. Our sweet boy Teo is way more concerned about getting the baby alebrijes out of the nest more than he is about finishing the trial. He's just worried about these baby animals getting hurt. As they pass each other, Teo and Aristella lock eyes, and she has the audacity to just like wink at him and keep running, which is absolutely infuriating and makes Teo want to beat her even more. The mama jaguar is done with Ocello and decides to turn away from them and go back to the nest. She tries to swat at Aristella's fire, but when she swipes at it, it burns her, and Teo can smell like singed fur. In this moment, Aurelio stops, turns back towards the nest, and like watches as this happens. Aristella is like, Aurelio, come on, like, let's go finish the trial. But he just stands there. And it pisses Teo off, because most things do. These baby albrijes are in danger, and Aurelio's doing nothing about it. As Teo approaches the nest, he does the very first thing he can think of and uses his wings to try and fan the fire out. That doesn't work. It just gives the flames extra oxygen and the fire gets bigger. Teo has an oh-shit moment because now the wall of fire is coming towards him and he braces himself for it, but before he gets burned, somebody jumps between him and the fire. Who might have the audacity to jump between our sweet boy and fire? Aurelio. He shoves the fire back, except now there's no one to protect the mama jaguar. Luckily, Marino appears just as Teo is shouting for Aurelio to stop, and he sends a huge wave to douse the flames, but the wave also catches Teo, but before he can fall off the island and fail the trial again, Marino reaches out and pulls him back up. Teo is shocked that Marino actually helped him, but he's relieved that all the albrijes are unharmed. Right now, he also looks for Aurelio again, but he's already running back towards the bridge to finish the trial. Now everybody's going after various albrijes, and somehow Shio found the smallest, peskiest, meanest one. It is this angry little mouse with a hummingbird beak and wings, and it's just like flying around Shio, just like poking at him, and this poor sweet boy, he cannot catch a break. The trumpets buzz because Aurelio and Aristella have now finished the trial. Teo just shouts at Nia and Shio to just grab something so they can go, and all the contestants are doing the same thing. Notably, Desi is charged by a rooster with bull horns, but he isn't worried at all. When the rooster touches him, it just stops and then cuddles up to Desi, and Teo's like, what just happened? Nia tells him that as the son of Amor, Desi can manipulate affection. So if you touch him, you may end up being completely infatuated with him. Now, Huimac's warning about not getting near Desi during the trials makes a lot more sense to Teo. Nia finds a bright red javelina with a head of a rhinoceros beetle and scoops that up, and the other contestants are quickly finding their own albrijes, and Teo's like running out of options. But then he hears a squonk, and Teo turns around to find this tiny toucanet with chameleon eyes and a snake tail. I have the little pin right here with our boy. It's so pretty, and I think it glows in the dark. Yeah, it glows in the dark. Teo reaches to go pick it up, but then there's another yowl from behind him. Shio has accidentally stepped on the tail of a midnight blue cat albrije that has a yellow turtle shell, and the mama albrije is pissed, and Shio's just like, I didn't mean to, I'm so sorry. Ugh. Our sweet boy. And so the mama albrije, with her big old bat wings, swoops down in front of them and lands in front of Teo and Shio. As Nia is like in between them and this pissed off mom, he notices that the toucanet is like standing in between the mom's legs. Then Teo thinks about Desi and how the rooster willingly went with him. I mean, granted it was because of like the affection manipulation, but it still went with Desi, and the mama albrije didn't go after him. The mama albrije has only gone after people who've forcibly taken her babies. So Teo says fuck it and tells Nia to stand down while he just like slowly steps forward. The mama jaguar is pissed, but Teo doesn't lose his cool. He just keeps focused on the toucanet, offers his hands out, and the toucanet just like hops up into his hands, and the mom like watches Teo. She gives a snort as like her blessing, and Teo takes the toucanet without being attacked. The mama is quickly distracted by Otzi, who's trying to take the cat, and Nia and Shio are amazed, and Teo's like, we gotta go. They use Shio's jacket to just scoop the hummingbird mouse and start running. They are going as fast as they can to the finish line, but Ocello is like right on their heels. They get across the bridge and dive across the finish. Ocello is right behind them, but instead of crossing the finish line, they slam into the barrier because the time is up. And so Ocello and Otzi did not complete the trial in time. Everybody is back on the platform with their parents to present their alebrijes, and Teo is feeling pretty good because he and Shio finished the trial and managed not to be last. So Teo's feeling good, but when it's Shio's turn to present his little hummingbird mouse, he opens up his jacket and nothing. No alebrije emerges from the jacket. Mala Suerte is like, where is it? Shio just looks really defeated, and Shio's like, it must have escaped while we were running, and Teo feels horrible. Capturing the hummingbird mouse in the jacket was his idea. Now, Shio's gonna rank low because of him. Ocello caught an alebrije, but didn't make it back in time, and Otzi, poor Otzi, didn't make it back in time and also didn't have an alebrije. So those who have alebrije finish presenting them, and then the ranking stones start to move. In first place is our girl Nia. Then we have Aristella. Third place, Aurelio. Then we have Marino, Teo, Desi, Shochi, Shio, Ocello, and Otzi. The first thing that happens after the rankings are determined is Aristella being pissed that Nia's first. Teo is flabbergasted that he came in fifth. Like, he does not believe it. Shio doesn't believe that he is not in the bottom. Ocello is pissed. They are wrathful, but have learned something since last time and keep their mouths shut. Poor Otzi is like devastated and she is scared. She is also 13. She is a badass, but also she is just a kid. Luna again reminds them that the rankings aren't just determined by the order in which they finish, but Soul's evaluation of them as a whole during the trials. Teo is slightly thrilled at this because the rubric is more abstract than just whoever wins, but also, he's thinking, how am I supposed to play the game when there are no rules? It's kind of like putting a puzzle together without seeing the picture on the outside of the box. You kind of know what you're doing, but not really. Fun fact, while I record this, I'm in my platform Doc Martens because I can't move these. And to be in frame all right, I have to be wearing 2-inch platform shoes. We are also getting the full gambit of hairstyles this week. That was totally unintentional, but kind of fun nonetheless. They release the alebrijes back to their mom, but Teo's little toucanet doesn't want to go because it loves him so much. But eventually the mama jaguar calls out and it flies away, so we lose her little buddy, but it was very, very sweet. On their way out of the arena, Nia is living, and honestly, so is Teo, because he beat out 4 gold semidioses. Quite the achievement for someone who does not have the training and the skills that the rest of them do. Poor Shio is not in high spirits because he's still ranked pretty low, but Teo and Nia assure him that there's still plenty of time to get higher in the rankings. Teo and Nia exchange worried looks. It was true, they did have time, but not much. It was almost like the universe was hell-bent on Shio messing up. They are all gross and sweaty from the trial and split off to go shower when someone yells, "Hey, rejects!" Can you guess who it is? It's my favorite. It's my favorite. Is it my favorite person ever, Aristella? Of course it is. And she has some words for our trio. "Let me give you some advice for surviving the trials," she said, coming to a stop before them. Aristella's eyes burned into Teo. "First, watch the way you talk to me." Teo scoffed, but she continued without pause. "And second, stay out of me and Aurelio's way." "How is that going to help me surviving the trials?" Teo shot back. Aristella took a step closer. It took everything in Teo to not instinctively step back. When she spoke again, her voice was low, deadly even. "Fuck around and find out, bird boy." Ooh, it's getting hot in here, and it's not just Aurelio. Aristella pushes past them, and they all agree that was mildly terrifying. Nia quickly follows this up with, "Why is someone so hot have to be so mean?" The Golds are a lot less full of themselves at dinner tonight. Shio is outright silent and goes to bed early, and Nia comes and hangs out in Teo's room, but eventually falls asleep on his bed, surrounded by candy wrappers. Wanting to distract himself from everything that's going on in his brain, Teo decides that he's gonna try and hit the gym. Guess who is also there? Would you believe it or not, we get another description of Aurelio bench pressing. What the fuck is happening? Seeing how hot Aurelio is, Teo panics and turns towards a punching bag. Because it's a punching bag, it doesn't seem that hard. In a moment of pure panic, he checks over his shoulder, and Aurelio is in fact watching him. And Aurelio, who I think is honestly just trying to be helpful, just goes, you're doing it wrong. And then Teo gets distracted again because he uses the bottom of his shirt to like wipe the sweat off his forehead, and Teo can see his abs. That is all Teo is focusing on. Teo, overconfident as ever, is like, it's a bag full of sand, you punch it, and then hits it again, nearly breaking his thumb. Aurelio, with his completely just detached attitude, comes over to teach Teo how to actually hit the bag, and Teo flips. Oh, you think you're so great? Like the literal golden boy? And then he challenges Aurelio to a one-on-one wrestling match because even if he isn't as strong as all the golds, he is scrappy. And he doesn't care if he wins or not, he just wants to irritate Aurelio. Teo continues to talk smack. He's just like going off. Oh, you think you're so cool and so strong and so powerful? And then suddenly Aurelio sweeps his leg under Teo, knocks him to the ground, and goes, that looks like it hurt. He offers a hand to Teo to help him up, but Teo, being Teo, swats it away and gets up on his own. As he's getting up, Teo notices that Aurelio is still wearing his like gold armbands, even in their like post-trial chillin'. Teo makes a quip about like, oh, do you ever take those off, or are you that committed to the aesthetic? And Aurelio just like goes very still and is like, no. And then he knocks Teo down again. This continues. Teo keeps making these like vaguely flirting, vaguely smack talk kind of comments, and Aurelio just keeps knocking him down. When he does, Teo's like, oh, I'm just warming up, like I'm just getting started. And it almost feels like they're kids again, and could you even imagine it? Maybe even friends? Eventually, Aurelio knocks Teo down a little too hard, and Teo like cries out when he hits the ground. Aurelio is like, oh shit, and goes over to help him up, but when he does, Teo grabs him and flips him onto the ground instead. He pins Aurelio and it's like, see, told you I was scrappy. If that's not flirting, I don't know what is. The flirtiness abruptly ends when Aurelio's like, yeah, but are you scrappy enough to get through the trials? Teo's heart sank. He pushed away from Aurelio and got back on his feet. You golds are really obsessed with becoming the Sunbearer, huh? He said gruffly, stretching out his wings before folding them against his back again. He frowned at Aurelio as the other boy slowly got back up to his feet. I mean, seems pretty stupid to me. Blindly following orders, putting yourself in danger just because your mom told you to. Aurelio's expression shuddered. It was a subtle shift in his posture, one that Teo couldn't name if he had to. But Aurelio was back to performing. Soul chose us for a reason, he said. I would gladly give my own life to maintain peace and prosperity in Reino del Sol. Really? That's funny, Teo challenged, taking a step forward. He heard the venom in his own voice. That's not how I remember the last Sunbearer ceremony. The muscles in Aurelio's shoulders tightened. Teo clenched his hands into fists at his side. I still remember how scared you were. And we get a little peek into their history. They were 7 during the last trials. What Teo remembers is Hoymak looking after them, thinking all the competitors were like super big and grown up and strong. And Teo also remembers how his mom kept him away during the Sunbearer ceremony. She had him wrapped up in her wings so he couldn't see what was going on. When the ceremony was over, he wanted to go back and play with his friends, but Quetzal wouldn't let him. When he looked over to Nia, she was just stick straight and just like clinging to her dad's side. Aurelio was just uncontrollably crying. Teo wanted to go over and comfort Aurelio because he had no idea what was going on, but Lumbre got some of her priests to just like take Aurelio home. And now the Aurelio standing in front of Teo is just a ghost of the little boy he used to be friends with. Aurelio tells Teo that everything's changed now and he understands the importance of the ceremony and why it needs to happen. There is honor in the whole thing, win or lose, and Teo's like, it's an honor to murder one of your friends. And Aurelio actually snaps back. This is a little spark of emotion we get to see from him. He says it would be an honor to die and keep his people safe. Teo recoiled a step. He'd never actually heard Aurelio raise his voice in anger before. The back of Teo's throat burned and his eyes stung traitorously. It'd been so easy to keep it together during the trials and in the face of Ocello and Auristela, but now Teo felt himself crumbling. Aurelio sees the shift in Teo's emotions and just takes a breath and tells him that he's just trying to help him because it isn't a fair fight. Teo thinks back to the conversation that they overheard between Aurelio, Auristela, and Ocello and realizes that, oh, maybe that's what he meant. The Jades are at a disadvantage because they don't have training, they don't go to the academy. And so finally, Teo relents a little bit and accepts Aurelio's offer of help. Okay, Aurelio said like he thought it was another one of Teo's pranks. Okay, he repeated, lifting his chin. Just don't cry when suddenly I'm kicking your ass in the trials. A surprised laugh jumped in Aurelio's chest, a small, relieved sound. Come on, he said, waving him back towards the heavy bag. I'll show you how to throw a punch without breaking your thumb. Oh, he's got jokes now, Teo grinned, falling into step next to Aurelio. Here, I thought they made you hand over your personality when you started at the academy. Aurelio rolled his eyes, but the hint of a smile tugged at the corners of his lips. Don't make me embarrass you again. Just a little banter, a little flirtiness. They train late into the night, but Teo ends up feeling super energized the next morning. He doesn't tell Nia and Shio that he was practicing with Aurelio. He just tells him that he was working out his wings, and Nia is like, oh my god, you were working out? Of your own free will? He lets her rib him because he doesn't want either of them to think that he is like siding with their competition. Aurelio and Aristella are across the room and these two catch eyes for a second. Teo doesn't expect things to be that different between them now, but he kind of hopes that they can be. But he has his own goals right now and he needs to focus on keeping Shio out of the bottom. It wasn't a big deal. Teo wouldn't let himself read into it. It was just a way to help him get ahead. Sure, Teo, we know exactly how much of a not big deal it is. And since it is the day between trials and it's kind of their rest day, they are going to get to go to an Alabrije sanctuary. As they're going through the city, Teo sees all the people with their animal companions, and this kind of makes Teo a little homesick for Quetzalcoatl and all the little bird companions. They tour the sanctuary and they're in the vet clinic, which has been empty of all the mortal visitors because the golds are here. While they're being shown around, Teo looks outside and sees a little petting zoo, which is one of the ways that the sanctuary raises money to take care of the Alabrijes. There are actual mortal people out there hanging out in the petting zoo. He less so asks and more just decides that he's going to go out to the petting zoo before any of the priests can stop him. Nia and Shio follow him and he finds a priestess outside and he just goes, can we feed the Alabrijes, please? She is just like, sure, do you want me to clear everybody out? And Teo's like, no, you don't need to do that. And also, Nia cannot wait that long because Nia is just like standing there looking at all the baby Alabrijes just like buzzing like she just needs to get in there. The priestess glances behind Teo and goes, all of you? Teo turns around and realizes that all of the other gold semidioses are standing behind him. They look super uncomfortable at the idea of like consorting with mortals, but that's fine with Teo. The priestess hands paper cups with food out to all of them, and meanwhile the mortals who are in the petting zoo are just like staring at all of the semidioses. Shio turns to Teo and is like, are they scared of the Alabrijes? Teo realizes, no, they're not scared of the Alabrijes. They just haven't interacted with mortals before. They've saved people, but they haven't actually talked to them. So they're kinda socially inept. Eventually, people start to loosen up and feed the animals, and after a while, a bunch of the mortal kids come over and start asking all of the gold's questions. Besides Aristella and Ocello, who are pouting in the corner, one of the little mortal girls is like talking to Nia, and she's like, I want to be a Sunbearer when I grow up too. And Aristella is just like standing over there and scoffs because she's a mortal and therefore cannot be the Sunbearer. And Nia just like smiles at the little girl and she goes, me too. And I love her so much. That night they have dinner at Fauna's temple, which is very incorporated with like nature and wildlife, and Nia asks how the animals don't go around eating each other because there's a bunch of predator and prey combos just kind of like chilling out. Shio says it's because Fauna has this calming presence on animals, and Nia looks over at Teo and is like, do you feel calm and relaxed right now? And Teo just looks at her and is like, I have wings, but I'm not a bird. They meet Fauna for dinner and also meet two of her daughters, Alejandra and Catalina. The slightly awkward conversation continues when Nia asks Teo if Fauna is his grandma because Quetzal is the diosa of birds. The answer is no. Fauna is like Quetzal's boss, essentially. Food is brought out and a lot of people are kind of surprised that there is actually meat on the table too. Fauna explains that it is a very sustainable city, and when an animal is killed for meat, like every part is used for textiles, for clothing, for objects. And then she looks at Teo and just goes, even your bones would make beautiful flutes. What? This sparks a whole new conversation at the table and people start asking Teo questions.
Are your bones really hollow? Do you perch? Do you eat bugs? Did you hatch from an egg?
Desi starts signing something to Marino, and Teo feels even worse because he knows they're talking about him, but doesn't know what they're saying. Fauna's daughter, Alejandra, decides to translate, and the question Desi asked was, does Teo have a cloaca? The first time I read this, I had to look up what a cloaca was because I had no idea. I'd never heard the word before. Here is the definition I found online. The rear orifice that serves as the only opening for digestive, reproductive, and urinary tracts, if present, in many vertebrate animals. So that question is entirely too much, and Teo leaves. Once in the hallway, Teo slumped onto a couch sitting against a wall and put his hands in his face. Why was it that just because his body was different from everyone else's, they thought they could ask whatever inappropriate questions they wanted? Whatever someone has in their pants is their business and no one else's. Fictional world or in the real one. Nia follows him out to the bench, and when she finds him, she apologizes and is very, very genuine and a very, very good friend. And then she just asks him what a cloaca is because she doesn't know, and I mean, homegirl, same. Then very endearingly, Teo pushes Nia off the bench, which honestly is surprising considering how strong she is. Back on the boat, Teo is hanging out in his room and Shio comes by. Shio asks Teo if he can ask a question, and Teo reflexively goes, I do not have a cloaca. And Shio's like, that was not what I was gonna ask. Teo is like, oh shit, what's up? And so Shio sits down on the bed next to Teo and in all caps goes, so you're like trans and stuff. Mentally, Teo's like, oh, this is that kind of conversation. Shio asks Teo what it's like being on T, and Teo tells him it's mostly smelly and sweaty, but good. Teo hadn't figured out he was trans until he was 15, and so he had his gender confirmation ceremony and 15s in the same year. And Shio tells him that that was very impactful for him. Seeing Teo do that kind of gave him the courage to have his own gender confirmation ceremony. They talk about Teo's top surgery and what a difference that and having his wings change has made for him. Shio tells Teo that he is not on T or any blockers, not because he doesn't want to be, but because the medical stuff makes his dad a little hesitant because you don't necessarily want the god of bad luck in a hospital. But his dad is all for supporting him, and Shio also says, it feels like there's parts of me people can't see or understand, Shio explained. I've never felt like I belong or fit in anywhere, and not because I'm a jade. I'm still not sure who I am. Teo takes this as Shio maybe figuring out if he might be bigender, agender, or non-binary, and asks him if he wants to use they, them pronouns, but Shio isn't quite sure yet. Teo tells him that is perfectly fine, especially because Soul is non-binary, and they are the big one, and that Shio's 13 and still has time to figure all this out. At this moment, Shio gets a little cagey and kind of shuts down a little bit. Teo thinks that this is because, oh shit, we're still competing in the Sunbearer Trials and there is a chance that he or I or anybody could die. When he tries to backtrack, Shio just says goodnight and leaves pretty quickly. This doesn't make Teo feel great because he feels like he placed more worry on Shio's plate, and he's just more reaffirmed than ever that he needs to help Shio make it through the trials, because everybody deserves a chance to get home safe and live their lives. Alrighty, it is a new day, a new trial, a new city. This time the trial is being held in the Opal Oasis, which is home to Dios Guerrero and one Jaguar child. With any gold city, it is very beautiful, but not as all natural as Fauna's city. There are giant skyscraper buildings all plated in gold and just towering. With all of the gold plating on the building, when the sun hits it, it makes it look like fire opals, which is maybe where the city got its name. And Ocello is living for it, despite claiming that Nia had the home field advantage. That clearly doesn't matter when you're the one with the advantage, right? As the boat makes its way into the city, people are lining the streets to welcome them all, and they're cheering particularly loud for Ocello, and Teo doesn't understand why, because they are such a jerk in real life. In the middle of this desert city is the arena, which has a big old forest this time. Everybody joins their parents on the platform as Luna starts explaining the trial. Even though there hasn't been a war in Reino del Sol in a very, very long time, cities used to capture important people from their enemies just to prove that they could. So this trial is going to be a bloodless battle. Essentially, they're going to be put into pairs and they're going to play freeze tag. and the last team standing wins. Audrey looks at Aurelio and starts getting excited, but then Luna's like, no. Soul has decided who the pairs are going to be. Moreno and Desi are together. Shochi and Otzi are paired together. Shio and Ocello are paired together. Ocello makes a really big deal about this because Shio is bad luck, and Malasuerte does not like that. And Luna, ever the badass that she is, says, do you have so little faith in your own abilities that you're going to need to rely on your partner to carry your team? And that is the end of that. Nia is paired with Audrey, which Audrey is not happy with, which just leaves Teo and Aurelio together. Praise Soul and their matchmaking abilities. All the teams start on the outer edge of the island, and as the trial begins, Teo and Aurelio bolt into the jungle. Aurelio suggests that they divide and conquer, and Teo's like, that never works out in any horror movie ever. And Aurelio goes, I don't watch movies. Teo is so shocked by this that he trips and Aurelio has to catch him, but Aurelio's kind of smiling as he does. Even though they're in the middle of a trial, they're still flirting, and I love that. I don't know if this is night 4 or night 5 of me filming this, but I have about 5.5 hours of footage already. My plan is to post this video next Saturday, so I need to edit that 5+ hours of footage and everything. I have about 3 hours left of recording, I think. So let's get into it. Soon thereafter, Teo and Aurelio are separated because Ocello barrels through the trees and heads right for Teo. Teo manages to fly out of the way and get up into the lower canopy of the trees, and Ocello's like, you can't stay up there forever. Teo's like, yeah, I can. What are you gonna do about it? Tear down the tree? Teo forgot that jaguars can climb, so as Ocello starts to transform into a more jaguar version of themselves, Teo decides that it is the best option to just dip. Instead of waiting for Ocello to finally make their way up the tree, he decides to fly off and find Nia and Shio before either of them can get tagged. He gets deeper into the jungle, and after a few minutes he sees Shio sitting at the base of one of the big trees, and he thinks that something has finally gone right. He's found Shio, he's here to make sure he doesn't get out, but as he gets closer he realizes that Shio is sitting a little too still. Unfortunately, our sad sweet boy has been tagged by one son of Amor. Now, Desi is still there with his back turned to Teo, and Teo thinks this is the perfect opportunity to get revenge on Desi for tagging Shio out, because Desi is distracted by what is happening in the clearing beyond him. Nia and Audrey are absolutely going at it. They are throwing metal weapons, they are throwing fireballs, they are throwing insults at each other. Even though they are supposed to be on the same team, they can't sort out their issues. So they're distracted, Desi's distracted, and this is the perfect opportunity for Teo. He swoops down from the trees, but the movement of the air is enough for Desi to realize that somebody's coming up behind him. When he sees Teo coming, he just smiles and lets Teo tag him. Instantly, all of Teo's anger melts, and he looks up at Desi and gets this warm, fuzzy feeling inside, because Desi is the most beautiful, wonderful, amazing, perfect, gorgeous person. Why aren't they better friends? Why don't they hang out more? Remember what Hoymek warns Teo about, not to get near Desi during the competition. And remember what Nia said about Desi's powers being affection manipulation. Teo decides that this is a great time to just plop down and cuddle up to Desi, very much like the Rooster Albrije from the last challenge. Somebody appears besides Teo and tries to pull him off, but Teo doesn't budge because he's protecting Desi, the most beautiful, wonderful, perfect, goodest boy in the world. Teo eventually realizes that it is Aurelio who's trying to pull him out of this love stupor. Even though he's under Desi's thrall, when Aurelio tries to pull Teo away, Teo feels this warm, pleasant burning on his skin where Aurelio's touching him. Aurelio tells Teo that what he's feeling is not real and to snap out of it, and Teo is just thinking, what an awful thing to say, that is totally not true. And then out from the jungle appears Marino, who, very much like Teo wanted to get revenge for Shio, Marino wants to get revenge for Desi getting tagged out, so he decides to go after Teo. So Aurelio decides to step in and defend his bird-brained boy. As Aurelio and Marino start to get into it, Teo hears Nia yelling at him. It doesn't matter, because he's with Desi, the most perfect, goodest boy in the entire universe. Still clinging to Desi, Teo does turn around and sees Aristella heading straight for him. Being the great friend that she is, Nia sends a metal rope to ensnare Aristella, and Aristella is pissed and calls Nia a traitor, but Nia doesn't care. She just poses and goes, "Bite me, princess." I couldn't take it seriously in the best kind of way because oh my god. And now Aristella's attention is back on Nia, and the two of them start fighting again. Everyone but Teo is still in the thick of it. Aurelio is super focused on fighting Marino. It's getting harder and harder because water is Aurelio's weakness as a fire demigod. So that's not good. But he's doing his best. He's ducking, he's dodging, he's weaving, he's getting out of the way. Eventually he moves until he's standing right in front of Teo. Marino shoots a jet stream of water at Aurelio, but at the very last second, he jumps out of the way. Who gets a face full of water? Our little bird boy. Teo is finally snapped out of it, and instantly he is super embarrassed, and he asks Aurelio, "Did I make an ass of myself?" And Aurelio just goes, "Yeah, a little bit." But the moment doesn't last because Marino is still in the game and still pissed about Desi being tagged out. Before he hops back in the fight, Aurelio turns to Teo and goes, "I got this covered. Go find someone else and don't get tagged." And Aurelio's concern for him makes Teo feel a little sparky. It's a little bit of that crush creeping in. So he flies back up into the trees to go find another competitor. Nia and Aristella must have figured their shit out at least a little bit because now Aristella is fighting Otzi. Teo feels really bad for Otzi because, again, she is 13. She is the youngest one besides Shio. But he is also not willing to get in between fireballs and lightning, so he continues on. Eventually, he comes across Nia and Ocello, except Ocello is face down in the ground. Relieved to have found each other, Nia tells Teo that usually she's pretty good at ignoring Aristella's rougher, bitchier edges, but since the trial started, she sometimes can't help herself, and it's very easy to get into fights with the other competitors, especially Aristella, because tensions are so high right now. But Aristella's busy right now, so Nia asks Teo what the plan is. "Why do I have to come up with the plan? You're the gold," he shot back. "Yeah, but you're the plan guy." "The plan was to keep Shio from getting tagged," he grumbled. "Well, that didn't work out. What's plan B? I need to come up with plan A and plan B. You're the plan guy." Two people came crashing through the trees. Both Teo and Nia screamed. She reached to grab Teo, but Teo quickly twisted out of her reach. "You almost tagged me! I'm sorry, I got scared!" Aurelio and Marino stumble into the clearing, still fighting. Because Aurelio's been blasted with water so many times, he can't go all flamethrower on Marino's ass. And Teo's a little shook to see Aurelio be bested by Marino, but it does make sense when you consider the fact that Aurelio can't produce flames like Aristella can. He can only manipulate them, and because his flint-tipped gloves are what, he therefore cannot create fire. Thinking fast, Teo jumps in between Aurelio and Marino, using his wings as a shield. Now he saved Aurelio from being berated by Marino's water, except Teo is directly in Marino's path and he is closing in. He is just within reach of Teo's wings when Aurelio tells Teo to just take off. Listening to Aurelio's instructions and letting instinct take over, Teo launches off right as Marino lunges towards him, but Aurelio is also lunging forward. Marino crashes to the ground, frozen, with Aurelio still standing. Now, Teo and Aurelio have both tagged someone, but their victory is short-lived when Nia is being pinned down by Shochi's vines. Her arms and legs are restrained, and Teo tries to get in the middle, but he gets knocked on his ass too. Now there's not much Teo can do, so he tells Nia to cut the vines, but she's like, "My hands are stuck," and she can't move. But then a light cuts through the vines, severing it and freeing Nia. Teo turns to see Aurelio with tiny little flames at his fingertips. Now that Nia's been freed, Shochi goes for Teo instead, but then Nia does this superhero punch on the ground, and the mud swallows Shochi up to her ankles so she can't get to Teo. Teo's impressed because he had no idea that Nia could do that, and she's like, "I can do a lot of things you don't know about," and then reaches down to help him up. Aurelio jumps in and is like, "Don't!" because they're still playing freeze tag, and Nia almost tagged Teo, and she just goes, It was worth a shot. They start arguing about, like, come on, like, we're not on the same team, but we're supposed to be working together, when all of a sudden there's a huge boom and Nia goes down. Otzi, our little underdog, stands behind Nia. She looks totally frazzled from the fight with Auristella, except Auristella isn't the one here, so that means she must have taken her down. Teo is really concerned about Nia because she just got struck with lightning and he knows a thing or two about that. Aurelio's like, it's fine. This happens all the time at the academy. Nia will recover. Ready to end this? And Teo's a little apprehensive because he doesn't want to get struck by lightning again. But Otzi's also been throwing around a lot of power, and her weakness is energy depletion, so she's definitely not at her full strength at this point. So, since our boys have each tagged one person, they decide to race to see who can tag Otzi first. Teo's like, I'll race you, and we get a little bit of a smile out of Aurelio as Otzi realizes that it is 2-on-1 and she is on the wrong side of this, and so she starts running. They race through the jungle, through trees, over logs. Teo is flying and he is having a great time, which is kind of the first in one of these trials. And at the very last second, Teo launches forward and manages to tag Otzi. The trumpets sound and Teo and Aurelio have won the trial. Teo is absolutely ecstatic, and Aurelio, like, despite having like the cool persona, is still looking very pleased with himself. And Teo realizes that on any given day, Aurelio should be able to outrun him. Now he's like not breathing heavy, like he looks fine. Maybe he isn't as haggard from his fight with Marino as Teo thought. Did you let me win? Teo demanded. I don't know what you're talking about, Aurelio said, cleaning his soot-covered hands and gold armbands off with the hem of his shirt. So we get another ab shot. Yes, you do. Without looking up, he turned around and started walking. Come on, it's time for the rankings. Everybody is back on the platform again, except the tone of the rankings is a lot different than it has been previously. Everyone looks exhausted and kind of nervous. Nia is getting checked out by Diosa Medica, and it's the first time that Teo's ever seen her look really stiff and sluggish. The rankings move again, and this time in first place we have Aurelio. Second is Nia, Desi, Teo, Auristella, Marino, Shochi, Shio, Ocello, and Otzi. Teo is super relieved to see that Shio is in 8th and that Ocello is still below him. Ocello is oddly quiet. Desi and his mom are super pumped. Poor sweet Otzi is nearly in tears but trying really, really hard to stay strong. Auristella is in 5th place, but she is just super happy for Aurelio and is celebrating his first place win. Aurelio seems genuinely happy and is smiling, and Teo sees this happen and has some feelings about it. Teo doesn't even realize that he's in 4th place until his mom points it out. He and Nia were the only competitors to tag 2 people, and this is the highest that a Jade has ever placed in any of the trials ever. Shio looks just as confused as Teo feels. Everybody's attention is now on Teo. Mostly it's the other gods kind of checking him out, but especially Lumbre and Auristella are giving him just like absolutely scorching, seething looks. Luna explains that Otzi placed so low because she caused physical harm to some of the other contestants, and this was supposed to be a bloodless battle. And the challenge was designed to test teams, so Ocello placed low because they abandoned Shio basically as soon as the trial began. Once again, Luna reminds them that this isn't like school. There isn't a rubric, there isn't a grading system. Soul is looking for the heart of their champion as well as their sacrifice, Diosa Luna continued. That's how the Sunbearer will be chosen. You would all do well to remember that. It's been a rough day for a lot of people. Once again, we are back on the boat. We are traveling to our next city, and it is our trio debrief time. Shio is working really hard to figure out how the rankings work, and Nia's just like, I'm just glad that none of us are on the bottom. And she says that Teo might actually have a chance at winning this. This isn't quite a relief to Teo because he doesn't think that Soul sees him as an actual contender, and he isn't worthy, right? But on the other hand, if he wins, that means the Jades might actually be taken seriously. Remember that whole conversation in the beginning of the book where Cheeseman is like, oh, let's get a picture of all the Jade rejects in a corner. It's not just the semidioses that are like ridiculed for being Jades, it is the gods too. And this could be a chance to like prove their worth. Because of that, Teo realizes that he kind of does want to win now that It's a possibility when it wasn't before. Ultimately, Shio's just glad that he's not on the bottom. When the group heads to dinner that night, these two are the only ones that are kind of upbeat. Everybody else is like worn out and exhausted, and again, poor Otzi. While they're at dinner, Teo is trying to silently communicate his congratulations to Aurelio for placing first during the trial, but Aristella is there whispering and shooting Teo really, really dirty looks all dinner. Most people decide to go to bed early because, again, it's been a really, really long day, but Teo is too hyped up from placing fourth in the trial, and he's got an itch in his skin to do a little bit of mischief. He makes a plan to sneak off the boat, and who does he decide to ask to come? Our boy. Our hot fire boy. Are you ready for this one, kids? The door opened to reveal Aurelio standing in a pair of tiny shorts and one of those gray, oversized douchebag tanks with huge armholes that drop down to his waist. This was the first time he'd seen Aurelio with his hair down. It cascaded to his shoulders, hiding the shaved sides in thick, shiny waves. Dressed down, soft and sleepy, this was a version of Aurelio that Teo knew he had never been meant to see. It sent a thrill down his spine, plunging into the pit of his stomach. For a second, Aurelio blinked at him, his bleary eyes widening with surprise while Teo gaped at him. "Damn, dude, I can see your nipples," Teo blurted out, taken aback by the sheer expanse of brown skin and muscle. I don't even need to say anything. Also, no tear. He's still wearing his arm pants, even though he was just chilling by himself in his pajamas. We will come back to this later. Aurelio was like, "Do you need something? I'm watching baking videos." Previously, Teo thought that Aurelio was just being super sarcastic and never considered the possibility that he might actually be watching and enjoy baking videos. Teo pushes that aside for the time being and says, "I've got plans. We're gonna get Nia a get well soon present, and come with me." It takes some convincing, but eventually the two of them do sneak off the boat and go into the city. They go undercover to a bodega to get a whole bunch of snack food and candy and like all sorts of junk that Nia loves. And after they get everything, Aurelio has the audacity to pick up a piece of candy and go, "What is this?" He is like, "What do you mean you don't know what this is?" Aurelio clarifies that he knows what it is, but he just doesn't eat candy because they don't have it at the academy. So Teo gives him a blue conchitada, and Aurelio, poor sweet boy, doesn't know what to do with it. So Teo helps him flatten it out and fold it until it's like a little rectangle and gives it to Aurelio to try. Teo asks him if there's any candy in his home city, and Aurelio tells him that he doesn't really leave the academy much these days, except for missions. He only ever really goes home to see his dad when it's his and Aristella's birthday, because that's when their mom lets them. Aurelio asks Teo how often he sees his mom, and Teo's like, all the time. He's hanging out in the temple, like Huemex his guardian, and that's kind of a perk of being a Jade, I guess, is that you have way less responsibilities. Aurelio tells him that he and Aristella have a rotating cast of priests, and the only constant in their lives is each other. Next, Aurelio tries some masapan, and it like immediately crumbles in his hands. And Teo's like, "You gotta open it gently." When Aurelio asks why, Teo's like, "That's just the way it is, and I have a lot to teach you." Aurelio tries to open another one and immediately fails again. Once again, there's this shift in the conversation where Aurelio brings it back to the trials. He tells Teo that if he becomes a Sunbearer, he will get to see all of the other cities. Teo's like, "I am surprised you think I have a chance at winning." Aurelio's thinking like everybody has a chance at winning, but Teo clarifies that no one really expects a Jade to actually win and become the Sunbearer. The gold semidioses go out, they train to be heroes, they have all of these big, important responsibilities, whereas Jade semidioses just kind of do whatever they want. Teo admits that after he graduates high school, it's very likely that he will just end up working in the temple with Huemak, like taking care of all the birds, and Aurelio tells him that that sounds kind of nice. Despite being a hero and getting to travel Reino del Sol, he doesn't really have time to just be. He is always super busy and doesn't really have time to do anything else, especially because of his mom, but he doesn't say it in as many words. For the first time, Teo realizes maybe being a hero isn't all that it's cracked up to be. Even though these gold semidioses live these like celebrity lives, Aurelio seems really, really lonely. Is that something that Teo would want if everything else in his life is like kept at a distance? He also realizes that this might be the last chance he has to be friends with Aurelio before their lives split off on completely different paths. He 100% expects to just like go work in the temple while Aurelio gets to go out and be a hero. The whole thing makes Teo kind of sick to his stomach, and he is done with the candy. So he leans over to throw it away, and when he does, his wing kind of shoots out a little bit and catches Aurelio's attention. Teo is a little bit embarrassed because the wings kind of have a mind of their own, and he gets a little defensive and asks Aurelio, like, what, do my wings weird you out? And Aurelio is like, why do you think that? Teo tells him it's because even as kids, like, he always looked at Teo's wings really funny and always went out of his way to avoid touching them. This is also a bit of Teo's insecurity creeping in because he's trying to find another reason why Aurelio might have dropped being his friend. Aurelio tells him that he likes his wings and that he's never touched them because Teo's never given him permission to. The thought that someone would wait till he gave them permission to touch his wings had never crossed Teo's mind because people historically have not asked him, they've just done it. So as carefully as possible, trying desperately not to ruin the moment, Teo tells Aurelio that he can touch them. Aurelio's like, are you sure? And Teo's like, haha, yeah, just don't make it weird, dude. And he turns so Aurelio can touch his wings. Aurelio's touch was surprisingly gentle and always so warm. Aurelio's fingers followed the path of his feathers, down the long primaries that ended at the tips of his wings. I didn't think they'd be so soft, Aurelio said quietly. Were you expecting scales? He asked, turning to look at Aurelio over his shoulder. Aurelio gave him a withering look, but the corners of his lips pulled into a smile, the kind that warmed his eyes and softened his always so serious expression. It was so distracting that Teo caught himself staring. Every nerve in his body danced and tingled. Aurelio's smile shifted to an expression so soft, and it made Teo hold his breath. And the moment is ruined by Luna appearing and telling them, I could have sworn I told everybody to stay on the boat. They have to do the walk of shame back to the boat. Surprisingly, Luna also caught Aristella sneaking off the boat to try and find where Aurelio was. Luna sends the three of them back to their rooms, and Aristella is very much like, come on, Aurelio. And Aurelio hesitates. This is not the first time he's done this. He turns away from his sister and turns to Teo, places in his hand a perfectly unwrapped marzipan, and tells him that he will see him tomorrow. We're in the home stretch, baby. This poor boy. He is going through so much.